My name is Candace. My birth month is in October, which is an even month, which means my paper will be against the criminal justice reform. I truly believe that the criminal justice system does not need a reform because it has a purpose and it served that purpose over the last several hundred years. There are valid reasons that the reformers will want to change the criminal justice system, which they truly aren't valid. They say they are, but they're not. They haven't looked at all the different viewpoints. They talk about mass incarceration, which is the comparatively and historically extreme rates of imprisonment, and by the concentration of young African American men living in neighborhoods of concentrated disadvantage. They talk about how mass incarceration is, around, but it's there because people commit crimes and we're prosecuting those who commit crimes at a higher rate than we ever have because they're actually getting arrested for the crimes they committed. They're getting charged with the crimes they committed, and our juries, which is the people of this country, are, finding people guilty of the crimes they commit, or they're pleading guilty during plea bargains. You know, if we teach our children to do the right thing at a young age, they're going to not commit crimes. They need to learn that there is repercussions for the crime they commit. So if parents kind of help do their part, we can kind of potentially lower mass incarceration by teaching our kids that there is repercussions for committing those crimes. Another big problem that they say is the conditions living in prisons aren't very good. But they don't need to have a very expensive, high living life in prison. They're there because they committed a crime. They don't need to be having big fancy beds and big fancy restrooms and big fancy anything. They committed a crime. They need to be held accountable. They can live with a, AC unit that's over the whole kind of area, but they don't need nothing fancy. They say another big problem is privately owned prisons. Today there are 27 states and the federal government use private prisons. In 2017, they kind of started to start using federal prisons even more than when they stopped during Obama's administration. They know how beneficial it is to have a privately owned prisons in our to help to use those because they allow us to house more inmates in there, which frees up room in our state and federal prisons for maybe high violent, offenders, offenders that are going to commit crime more often. Um, so it's definitely a good option that we continue to use privately owned prisons because it allows more room in our prisons and kind of make sure that we're not overstaffing and over holding inmates in our prisons that the government owns because those are our tax-paying dollars. Reformers say that the people of color are arrested more than anything, but when you look at a statistical report from the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for the fiscal year 2016, it talks about on-hand inmates, so inmates that are currently on hand during the time of this report, and there was 45,000 blacks, 42,000 whites, and 45,000 Hispanics, which means that there's no big disparity in that number, meaning that there are going to be, maybe one's going to be higher one time, another one's going to be higher at another time, but they're all equally almost represented in our prison system for, same amount of crimes being committed. Whoever's going to be arrested is going to serve time. They're not, if they're guilty, they will. If they're innocent, they'll be let go. That's how our criminal justice system works. Another big issue they talk about is the types of offenses and numbers that are in prisons. Violent offenders are the highest incarceration rates of 80,000 because that's going to be the highest number of crimes that are committed, whether it be robbery, whether it be murder or rape or anything of that nature. Those are going to be the ones that we definitely want in our prison system because we don't want them living out among the streets. I know I wouldn't be happy with a murderer living next door to me. I would not be okay and be scared for my life. But those are just things that are, they're gonna be in the prison. They talk about how they want to legalize drugs and make the minimums and maximums lower. But drug offenses are still the second highest incarceration rate, with 18,000 people in prison during the statistical report. Sorry. People on drugs tend to do things that aren't rational to lead to other violent crimes. So we definitely need to realize that drugs are not going to help the situation. They looked at a report, the Bureau of Justice Statistics. They look at the high school seniors and found that 65% of them had said they had alcohol within the last 12 months. Mind you, they're not even 21 years of age. they said that there was 32% that said they have done marijuana in last 12 months. Marijuana is not even legalized. They should not be able to get marijuana at such a young age. That is just saying that they're going to lead to a life of danger and drugs in the future, even if they're at such a young age. So we need to make sure that drugs are not accessible to our young kids. We want them to succeed in our life, and drugs definitely do not help encourage that. So we definitely need to get the minimums and maximums higher, because if we lower them, people are going to be like, oh, I'm okay with getting caught with, an ounce of marijuana if that only means a year in jail or in prison. That's not what the point of having a minimum lower sentence is for. We want them to know that if they're going to commit a crime and be charged with something that's drug related, that they're going to serve their time. Yeah, it's not a high violent crime, but still, it can lead to worser things. We want the minimums and maximums to be where they're at. I truly believe the criminal justice system does not need a reform, just because of all the things that the reformers say we need. We don't need mass incarceration. Is something that we're just gonna have to deal with. It's something that if people are continue to commit crimes, we're going to have a higher incarceration rate. So there's not really any going around. If people just stop committing crimes, we won't have that problem. But if they have people committing crimes, we're gonna have those incarceration rates. And not only one race gets arrested and gets held accountable. You might not hear about everything in the news because the news has its own way, but there's not just one type of race getting, arrested all the time. It's going to be all of them. Private prisons are a good thing. They help our state prisons, do put money in other places rather than just, trying to hold all these offenders. Private prisons are profit or non-profit. They're going to make money because they're a business. They need to survive. Drug offenses make up a smaller number of crimes than violent crimes, but they still need to have the same sentencing. And then, so the criminal justice does not need a reform. People are still going to commit crime. They need to be held accountable. They truly have a purpose, and they serve that purpose when people are arrested and they get their sentencing.